Rain found every seam in the Emperor's palace and made a slow music of it. It ran down the ribs of black stone, gathered in the mouths of carved gargoyles, and fell in thin ropes into the gutters that cut the floor like channels for blood. The air smelled of wet basalt and old incense. Somewhere far beyond the walls, Dromund Kaas roared with the patience of a storm that had never known an ending. Emperor Vitiate did not move as the thunder moved. He sat in stillness that made the hall feel like a shrine built around a single, unblinking eye. His presence pressed down on the kneeling figures before him. Sith lords, soldiers, servants, until even pride became a careful thing, held close like a dagger under a cloak. Darth Arenth Kell kept his forehead near the slick stone and did not dare breathe too loudly. He had learned, in a lifetime spent sharpening himself among predators, that there were creatures beyond the simple ranks of hunter and hunted. He had sensed it the first time he had been brought into this chamber, how the dark side here was not a flame, but an ocean, and how the Emperor sat at its bottom, dreaming. "Rise," the Emperor said. The word did not travel through air. It arrived inside bone. Arenth pushed up to his knees, then to his feet. He kept his eyes lowered, not out of humility, but calculation. The court on Dromund Kaas survived on calculation. The only difference here was that the Emperor saw every sum. "You have argued for war," Vitiate said, and though his voice was soft, it turned the torches uncertain, as if they were remembering fear. Not against the border worlds. Not against the scattered holdings that have forgotten discipline. You have argued for the core. No. Arenth's mouth was dry. Yes, my Emperor. A twitch, almost imperceptible, touched the corner of Vitiate's lips, if it was his lips. In this light, his face seemed too pale, too composed, too distant from the human lies at war. "And why is it that you hunger for the core, Arenth?" "Because I have watched the Dark Council choke itself on patience," Arenth thought. "Because I have watched strong hands soften into accounting ledgers. Because I have watched the Empire grow sleek and secret until it is more shadow than blade. Because there is only one way to prove you are greater than the men who would chain you, by letting the galaxy know your name." He did not say any of it. "Because the Republic believes we are dead," Arenth said. "Because their complacency is a door left unbarred. Because the Jedi will not see the knife until it is in their ribs." Silence pooled. Acolytes along the edges of the hall held their breaths like thieves. Vitiate's gaze lifted slightly, and the world seemed to tilt toward it. "A century," he murmured, as though savoring the taste of the word. 100 years of further preparation. 100 years of ships, routes, training, secrets built into secrets. That was the schedule you were raised to honor. None. Arenth could feel the trap set in the language. He chose his next words as if stepping across thin ice. "The schedule is a tool, my Emperor, not a god." A faint ripple passed through the hall. An acolyte's hands tightened on a ceremonial staff. An Imperial guard shifted his weight, armor scraping like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. Vitiate looked beyond Arenth, past the columns, past the walls, as if the rain itself were an inconvenience. "Tools break," he said, "and gods do not ask permission." Arenth's heart kicked once hard. He had wanted this, wanted it so fiercely it had become a kind of prayer. Yet standing here, he tasted something beneath his triumph. Not fear of battle, fear of scale. Fear that this was not war he was being granted, but a wound opened in the galaxy for someone else to drink from. "You will have what you asked for," Vitiate continued. "The core will bleed early. The Republic will learn that time is not its ally, and the Jedi—" A pause, and the pause felt like a hand closing. "Will remember why they once trembled at the name Sith." Arenth bowed, lower now, unable to stop himself. "Command me." Vitiate's attention returned at last, and in it Arenth felt a cold affection, like a blade pressed gently against skin. "Go and speak to Rethan," the Emperor said. "Tell him the fleets sail tonight." Arenth's head snapped up before he could stop it. "Tonight?" Lightning cracked so close the stone vibrated. The torches guttered. For an instant, the Emperor's face seemed not pale but empty, a mask with a starless void behind it. "Yes," Vitiate said, and the word was final in the way tombs were final. Aranth lowered his gaze again, swallowing the rest of his questions. Tonight meant routes not fully scouted, caches not perfectly placed, political knots in the Empire not fully tied. Tonight meant risk. Tonight meant the Emperor was tired of waiting, and that, Aranth understood with a sudden sick clarity, was the most dangerous mood in the galaxy. He backed away in the prescribed ritual, never turning his back. As he crossed the threshold, the rain's sound changed, becoming louder, closer, like the whole world outside was eager to listen. Behind him, the Emperor remained unmoving, and yet Aranth felt him following, not with eyes, but with will. The dark side in this place was not merely power. It was appetite. It was intention given gravity. Aranth stepped into the corridor and let his lungs fill, once, with air that did not belong to a god. Then he began to walk faster, robes whispering over wet stone, toward the hangars and the war rooms, and the men who believed they commanded fleets. Tonight, the Empire would announce itself to the core. Tonight, the galaxy would wake up screaming. Moff Rethan Saren's war room smelled like steel, old paper, and the bitter herbs medics used to clean blood. That was not an accident. Rethan believed in reminders. He believed a commander's first betrayal was comfort. The chamber had been cut into the bedrock beneath Kas City, sealed from the weather, yet the storms still seemed to haunt it. Now and then, lightning flashed through the narrow windows set like slits in the stone, painting everyone momentarily corpse white before the torchlight reclaimed them. Rethan stood at the center table, hands planted on its edge, staring down at a holomap that shimmered with starfields and lines like veins. He looked carved himself, broad shoulders, square jaw, a scar at his throat that caught light like a pale worm. Men like him did not rise through the Empire by being loved. They rose by being inevitable. Around him, captains and analysts waited, silent, as if speaking first might be punished. When Aranth entered, wet robes darkening at the hem, the room's attention shifted as one creature. Rethan did not look up at first. He knew footsteps. He knew which footsteps mattered. "Darth Aranth," he said at last, voice like gravel. "If you have come to preach patience again, you'll find I've misplaced my faith." Aranth did not bother with greeting rituals. The Emperor has moved the schedule. That earned Rethan's eyes, sharp, pale, appraising. "Forward?" "Tonight," Aranth said. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the holomap and the faint, distant groan of thunder above. Then Rethan smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. It looked like a man opening a door he had dreamed about for years. Finally, a captain to Rethan's right swallowed. "Moff, the 4th and 9th battle groups are still rotating through refit. The supply tenders will follow," Rethan cut in, "or they will choke on their own excuses and be reassigned to sanitation." Aranth watched him with something close to admiration. Rethan's hunger had always been disciplined. Unlike many Sith, unlike many officers, he understood that war was not only glory, it was logistics, and logistics was murder done with paperwork. Rethan leaned over the holomap, and with a flick of his finger he brought up a cluster of worlds. Trade routes, defense arrays, shipyard icons. Names flickered. Brentaal, Anaxes, Kuat Tori. The core skeleton. "Direct thrust?" Rethan asked, more to himself than Aranth. "Or a feint, to pull their fleets outward?" "The Emperor wants the core to bleed early," Aranth said. "He wants panic. He wants their Senate choking on its own disbelief." Rethan's gaze went distant, imagining it. "Then we strike where their pride lives," he murmured. "We show them their center is not a fortress, only a habit." An analyst cleared his throat softly. "Moff, there is still uncertainty about their readiness. The Republic's last major conflict ended barely a generation ago. They're Jedi. The Jedi, Rethan said, and the word held contempt and a shadow of respect. They will come. They always come. That is why we do not waste time trading blows at the rim. We cut the nerve. We make them choose which limb to save. Aerynth's eyes narrowed. You have ships positioned? Ships in silence, Rethan replied. He tapped the table again. A thin red line appeared across the map. Not one of the Republic's known hyperlanes. It curved like a scar into the bright heart of the galaxy. Routes the Republic does not believe exist. Routes their patrols do not watch. The Emperor gave us this knife long ago. We have kept it sharp. Aerynth felt the thrill again, sharp enough to sting. Then you can reach Corasont. Rethan's smile returned, smaller now. Not yet, he said. Not cleanly, not without assistance. He gestured, and a door at the far end of the chamber opened. A figure stepped through, slim, hooded, moving with the careful grace of someone trained to be forgotten. The room seemed to recoil instinctively, as if the air itself disliked making space. Rethan's tone changed, becoming almost formal. Operative Saren Cal, he said. Saren lowered the hood. The face beneath was neither striking nor plain, an intentional forgettability, eyes dark and steady. Muff, Saren said, voice calm, empty of ceremony. Then, to Aerynth, a slight incline of the head. My lord. Aerynth recognized the type. Imperial intelligence. The Empire's other blade. Thin, hidden, aimed at throats rather than battlements. Saren will open our path, Rethan said. There are defenses around Corasont that cannot be overcome by ships alone. Not quickly. Not without announcing ourselves too soon. But a single knife, placed correctly, can do what an army cannot. Nay. Saren's expression did not change, but Aerynth felt the faintest ripple of amusement. I have already been studying their habits, Saren said. Their customs officers, their security redundancies, their undercity commerce routes. Their pride makes them predictable. Rethan turned his attention back to the officers. Mobilize the fleets, he ordered. All battle groups. Launch protocols begin now. Tell the crews they are no longer ghosts. Tonight, they become history. No. The war room moved like a kicked anthill. Officers bowed and hurried, boots striking stone, voices low and urgent. The holomap's light flickered across their faces, making them look like conspirators in a chapel. Aerynth remained, watching Rethan and Saren. The Emperor expects results, he said quietly. Not merely spectacle. Rethan's jaw tightened. I do not intend to fail, he said, and there was something old in it. An oath, perhaps, made before Aerynth was even born. The Republic will learn what we have become in the dark. Saren spoke without looking away from the map. And if the Jedi sense us, Saren said, we will ensure they sense us too late. Outside, thunder rolled again, and the sound was not weather now. It was a drum. The hangar was a throat, swallowing men and spitting out machines. It opened to the storm, and rain fell in sheets through the mouth of it, hissing where it struck hot metal. The air was thick with fuel and ozone, with the sharp sting of solder and the sweeter stink of sweat. Mechanics moved among the scaffolds like ants around a dead beast, tightening bolts, checking seals, blessing systems with ritual phrases half borrowed from ancient Sith rites and half from the superstitions of exhausted laborers. Saren walked through it without urgency. Urgency was how you drew eyes. Saren preferred absence. A transport waited at the far end, small, plain, unmarked, designed to vanish among civilian traffic. Its hull was matte, swallowing light. The only ornamentation was a line of tiny symbols etched near the hatch, Imperial codes that would mean nothing to anyone who had not been trained to read them as scripture. Rethan stood near a stack of cargo crates, hands behind his back, watching the final preparations for the larger ship beyond. A battle cruiser suspended in the hangar's open cavern, like a predatory fish in dark water. Its silhouette was all spines and angles, A cathedral made of armored plates, windows like narrow, unwelcoming eyes. "You travel alone," Rethan said, voice carrying only because the hangar's noise respected him. Saren paused beside the transport's hatch. "Alone is safer," Saren replied. "And faster." Rethan's gaze flicked over Saren's clothing. Dark, layered, practical. It looked more like a common spacer's garb than the uniform of the Empire's most secretive arm. "If you are caught," he said, "the Republic will learn we exist before my fleets are in position." Saren's mouth curved slightly. "Then it is fortunate," Saren said, "that I do not intend to be caught." Rethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You know what you are doing?" he said. "Not just the task, the consequence." Saren's eyes lifted to the battlecruiser, to the crew swarming its underside, to the red-lit bays that looked like wounds. "The consequence is war," Saren said. "War was inevitable. The Emperor has simply chosen the hour." Rethan held Saren's gaze for a long moment. There was something like respect there, grudging and real. "You have clearance to use whatever resources you need," he said. "Credits, contacts, threats. The Empire is a knife," Saren finished softly. "Yes." Rethan's expression sharpened. "No," he said. "The Empire is a promise. To every world the Republic has grown fat upon. To every species it has dismissed as peripheral. To every Sith child taught that power is their birthright, and that they have been cheated of it." Saren did not argue. Saren had seen too much of the Empire's underside to believe any promise was pure. But promises did not need purity. They needed believers. "You will be on Corasont within the day," Rethan said. "Our scouts report their hyperlane monitoring is nostalgic. They still look for enemies where enemies used to come from." Saren's fingers brushed the edge of the hatch, feeling the coldness of the metal. "They will adjust," Saren said. Rethan's scar shifted as he spoke. "Not fast enough." Behind them, the battlecruiser's engines cycled, a low growl that resonated in bone. Men cheered, quietly, disciplined, but the sound carried an animal joy. It was the sound of something long caged being shown an open gate. Saren stepped into the transport and turned once more. "Moff," Saren said. "If you reach the core and Coruscant still stands untouched, do not assume failure." Rethan's brow lowered. "What should I assume?" Saren's eyes were dark as wet stone. "Assume," Saren said, "that the Republic is not the only thing on Coruscant worth killing." Rethan stared, and for a second the hangar's noise faded in Aaron's mind, replaced by that sentence echoing like a prayer spoken backward. Then Saren vanished into the transport, the hatch sealing with a soft hiss. Rethan watched the unmarked ship lift, rise into the storm, and become a blur against the rain. He did not flinch when lightning struck the hangar, shielding a breath later. He did not flinch when the battlecruiser's engines roared louder. He only smiled again, and the smile was a man who had been given permission to burn a world. On Coruscant, the rain was clean. It fell in controlled sheets, guided by weather regulators, washing the endless city's upper tiers in a gentle, scheduled rhythm. It did not howl like Drahman cows. It did not rage. It simply existed, another civic function, another tidy promise that the Republic's heart could not be surprised by nature. Talon thought that was the problem. He stood in the high meditation chamber of the Jedi Temple, hands folded in his sleeves, and listened to the city's hum beyond the thick transparisteel. Speeders traced light lines through the air like glowing insects. Far below, the Undercity's darkness pressed up like an ocean, unseen and unspoken. The temple rose above it all, serene and bright, built to be a reassurance. Yet tonight, reassurance tasted like ash. Jedi Master Talon Var had been trained to recognize disturbance in the Force the way a sailor recognized a change in wind. This was not a breeze. This was a pressure shift that made the bones ache. Beside him, Jedi Knight Eleanor watched his face with careful attention. She was young enough that the temple still felt like home rather than obligation, but old enough to have scars hidden under sleeves. The Jedi did not advertise their wounds. "You haven't slept," Yela said softly. Talon did not look at her. His eyes remained on the distant glitter of Corasont, on the towers that caught the city's own lights and wore them like crowns. "Sleep is for when the Force is quiet," he replied. Yela's brow furrowed. "The Force is always speaking." "Yes," Talon said, "but it is not always shouting." He closed his eyes. The chamber's air was perfumed faintly with temple incense, clean and calming. It did not help. Beneath it, under the calm, he sensed something cold moving through the dark spaces between stars, something patient and old. It was not merely anger. It was not merely hunger. It felt like a mind that had learned to wait, and had now decided waiting was no longer necessary. Yela shifted her weight. "Master," she began, then hesitated as if afraid to name the thing. "Is it the Sith?" The word, spoken here, felt sacrilegious. It had been generations since the Jedi had openly fought the Sith as an organized power. The last great shadows had worn different names, different masks. The galaxy had learned to fear other monsters. Talon opened his eyes again. "There are always Sith somewhere," he said. "There are always Darksiders. That is not what I feel." "What do you feel?" Yela asked. Talon's gaze flicked toward the chamber's center, where a shallow pool reflected the ceiling's lanterns. The water lay still, a mirror. He remembered a lesson from his own master. The Force often spoke in reflections, in distortions of what you thought you understood. "I feel," Talon said slowly, "the return of an empire that believes itself owed." Yela's breath caught. "That's impossible." Talon's mouth tightened. "So is 1,000 other things," he said. "And yet the galaxy has never been polite enough to obey our assumptions." He turned toward the chamber's exit. The corridor beyond was quiet, lined with statues of past masters whose faces looked eternally calm. Talon wondered, not for the first time, how many of them had died believing calm could protect them. "We should inform the council," Yela said, already moving. Talon paused at the threshold. "We will," he said. "But do not expect them to welcome fear. The council is a place of patience, of caution." "And you?" Yela asked. Talon looked down at her, and for a moment his expression softened. "I am old enough," he said, "to know that caution can be a form of denial." They walked a long corridor together, footsteps echoing faintly. In the temple's heart, other Jedi moved quietly through their routines, unaware. The temple was full of light, full of peace, and in the Force, far beyond Coruscant's clean reign, something smiled. The Senate was never truly quiet. Even in its calmer hours, it murmured like a hive. Voices layered upon voices, ambition disguised as policy, fear disguised as procedure. Supreme Chancellor Liza Terran sat in the center of it, high enough that the tiers of senators curved around her like an amphitheater of judgment. The chair was designed to look modest, an embodiment of Republican humility, but everything else around it was grandeur. Banners, polished stone, a ceiling lost in shadow, and the shimmering blue of holodisplays that hung in the air like summoned spirits. Lysa looked tired. Not the tiredness of lack of sleep. She had slept, or at least rested. It was the tiredness of being watched. Every movement was weighed. Every word, recorded. Every hesitation, translated by enemies into weakness. When Talon entered the Rotunda's private dais area, escorted by temple liaisons, Lysa's expression shifted with practiced composure. A Jedi Master arriving unannounced was never a simple courtesy call. It was either trouble, or the warning of trouble. "Master Talon," she said, rising just enough to show respect without surrendering authority. "You rarely visit me without an appointment." "I apologize," Talon said. He bowed slightly, the gesture careful. Jedi and politicians danced with different rules. "This cannot wait." Lysa glanced at the nearest advisors, sleek-haired aides, security chiefs, the kind of people who existed to absorb impact. "We have 5 minutes," she said. and her voice carried calm that felt almost weaponized. "Speak." Talon did not waste the time on ritual language. "There is a disturbance in the Force," he said. "Something organized. Something immense. I believe the Sith Empire is moving." Namnai. The words landed like a stone thrown into a pool. The ripples were immediate. An advisor's eyes widened. A security officer's hand moved unconsciously toward his belt. Lysa did not react so openly, but Talon saw the shift in her gaze, the brief, sharp calculation of risk. "The Sith Empire is a ghost story," Lysa said, not dismissive, but careful. "A useful one for senators who want more defense funding." "A ghost story," Talon replied, "does not press itself against the Force like a blade against skin." Lysa's jaw tightened. "You are certain?" Talon breathed in. The rotunda's air smelled faintly of metal and perfume, of too many bodies and too many secrets. "I am as certain as I can be of anything that has not yet arrived," he said. "Which is to say, I believe ignoring this would be catastrophic." Lysa's eyes narrowed. "What do you want from me?" "Mobilize the Navy," Talon said. "Increase patrols along the outer rim trade corridors. Contact sector defense forces. Prepare evacuation protocols for key worlds, not just the frontier." He held her gaze. "The core." At that, Lysa's composure cracked just enough for Talon to glimpse the fear beneath. It was not personal fear. It was fear for an entire civilization built on the assumption that its center was safe. "Evacuate the core?" she echoed softly, as if tasting the absurdity. "Master Talon, do you understand what that would do? Panic would spread faster than any enemy ship. Markets would collapse. Systems would secede. There are senators in that chamber who would rather see the Republic burned than admit they were wrong about preparedness." "I understand," Talon said. "I also understand what it means to be unprepared when the Sith arrive." Lysa studied him, weighing sincerity against possibility. Then she exhaled slowly. "If I order mobilization without evidence," she said, "I will be accused of militarizing for political gain. The Jedi will be accused of manipulating the Senate. And if you do nothing," Talon said, "you will be remembered as the Chancellor who watched the storm approach and argued with the sky." For a moment, Lysa's eyes closed. When she opened them, she looked older. "What evidence can you give me?" she asked. "The Force is not admissible in your committees," Talon said. "But I can give you this. Allow me to dispatch a team to investigate the border disturbances we've already been receiving. Piracy reports, missing freighters, patrol craft that vanish." Lysa's head snapped slightly. "Those are scattered incidents." "So are the first drops of rain," Talon said. "Until the flood." She stared at him. Then, with a small, decisive motion, she turned to an aide. "Contact Admiral Kever," she ordered. "Quietly. No public notice. I want readiness reports from the core defense fleet. And I want a full analysis of missing shipping manifests." "Noon. Da." The aide bowed and hurried away. Talon felt some tension ease, but not enough. "Thank you," he said. Lysa's gaze sharpened again, the politician returning. "Do not thank me yet," she said. "If you are wrong, Master Talon, the Senate will carve pieces off my administration and feed them to their donors. If you are right..." She paused, and her voice dropped. "If you are right, then 5 minutes is already too late." Talon inclined his head once more. "Then we should not waste another breath." Behind them, the Senate chamber's murmur continued. Debates about tariffs and treaties, about minor systems and minor egos. The Republic's heart was talking about coins while a knife moved toward its throat. Admiral Kavar Dorn's office was smaller than most senators' private lounges, and Kavar preferred it that way. He distrusted comfort. Comfort made you slow. The walls were lined with star charts, paper and hollow both, because Kavar believed redundancy was a virtue, not paranoia. A half-finished tub of K8 sat untouched beside a stack of fleet readiness reports. The air smelled of ink, metal, and the faint sting of antiseptic from a med pack left open in a corner. Kivar had a habit of treating his own cuts rather than waiting for a medic. It kept him honest. When the holocall came in, he answered immediately. Lysa's image flickered into existence above his desk, blue and ghostly. Her face was controlled, but Kivar had served long enough to read what she hid. "Admiral," she said without preamble, "I need a readiness assessment of the core defense fleet, now." Kivar's jaw set. "This is sudden," he said carefully. "Humor me," Lysa replied. "And keep this quiet." Kivar leaned back, fingers steepled. "We can bring patrol groups to full sortie within 6 hours," he said. "The heavier cruisers require longer. Some have been cannibalized for parts to keep the rest operational. Budget constraints." "Nah, Lysa's eyes narrowed. "How long for full mobilization?" Kivar exhaled through his nose. "If the Senate stops arguing and starts funding," he said, 2 weeks. If they don't, months." Lysa's image sharpened as the holoprojector adjusted. "We may not have weeks," she said. Kivar's gaze flicked to the star charts on his wall, to the cluster of worlds that mattered most. "Then someone knows something I don't," he said. Lysa hesitated, one heartbeat too long. Kivar's stomach tightened. "The Jedi have concerns," she said, "about a potential threat." Kivar's voice went flat. "The Jedi always have concerns." "This is different," Lysa said, and the firmness in her tone warned him not to push. Kivar nodded once. "Understood," he said. "I'll initiate silent readiness protocols, increased patrol density along the major hyperlanes, emergency recall of dispersed ships, and I'll review our planetary defense integration." A chime sounded behind Kivar, and one of his officers stepped in without waiting for permission. Lieutenant Maris, young, pale, eyes too bright. "Admiral," Maris said, and Kivar hated the tremor in his voice. "We just received a distress transmission from Brentaal's outer comm relay." Kivar's eyes narrowed. "Brentaal is a trade world," he said. "Their relays are redundant. What happened?" Maris swallowed. "The relay station reports unknown warships. They say the ships are firing on civilian traffic. They say the attackers are boarding vessels. The phrase used was..." Maris glanced at the holocall, suddenly aware of Lysa. "Imperial vessels." Silence fell like a curtain. Lysa's blue image held perfectly still. "Imperial," she repeated softly. Kivar felt the hairs on his arms lift. "The Republic has no Imperial fleet," he said, voice low. "Unless someone is playing a political joke with very expensive props." Maris shook his head quickly. "They sent visuals, sir," he said. "The ships, dark hulls, angular, with red markings, not Republic design, not Mandalorian, not pirate built. They look like..." Kivar's mouth went dry. He knew the old images. The ancient holo-recordings kept in military archives. The grainy footage from wars centuries gone. He had never believed he would see that silhouette again outside a historian's lecture. Lysa spoke first. "Admiral," she said, and her voice held a quiet steel. "I want confirmation. I want survivors. And I want you ready to move." Kivar's hands tightened into fists on his desk. "Yes, Chancellor," he said. The holocall flickered off. For a moment, Kivar did not speak. He looked at Maris, and his expression was cold enough to freeze metal. "Lock down this office," Kivar ordered. "No transmissions out except through encrypted channels. Get me the Jedi liaison, and send a recall order to every ship within 2 jumps of Brentaal." "Nah." Maris nodded rapidly and hurried out. Kivar stood, walking to the wall chart of the core. His finger hovered over Corasont's bright marker, then slid outward along the trade arteries to Brentaal. A heartbeat of distance. A breath. He thought of Lysa's face, controlled but frightened. He thought of the Jedi Master's warning, which had sounded like mysticism until now. He thought of the word Maris had not wanted to finish saying. Sith. Kivar's eyes narrowed. "So," he murmured to the empty room. The ghosts are real. Outside his window, Coruscant's clean rain continued to fall, and the city went about its routines. Kivar felt the storm coming anyway. The first scream Brentaal heard was electromagnetic. Its comm relays flared with static as if the void itself had been set on fire, and for a handful of seconds no signal left the system cleanly. Then the unknown ships emerged, black shapes from hyperspace that should not have existed, their hulls too angular, too deliberate, as if carved rather than built. Trade freighters died first. Slow, fat with cargo, trusting in the Republic's reputation as armor. Their captains did not know how to run. They did not know how to hide. They tried to hail, to negotiate, to appeal to law. The law did not answer. On the bridge of the lead battlecruiser, Rethan watched the destruction with the expression of a man witnessing an experiment succeed. The bridge was lit in red and shadow, panels glowing like banked coals. Officers moved with disciplined speed, boots striking deck, plating with crisp rhythm. There was no chaos here. The chaos was outside, carefully cultivated. "Target the comm relay," Rethan ordered. His voice was calm, almost bored. "Disable. Do not destroy. I want their distress call to crawl." "Yes, Moff," an officer replied. A holodisplay showed Brentaal's orbital lanes, bright lines of civilian traffic now breaking into panicked scatter. The first freighter to attempt an emergency jump tore itself apart on an interdiction field, its hull splitting like a fruit under pressure. Debris spun away, glittering briefly before the battlecruiser's secondary cannons turned it into dust. A junior officer swallowed audibly. Rethan's gaze flicked toward him. "If you're going to weep," Rethan said, "do it quietly." The officer stiffened, face flushing. "No, sir." Rethan turned back to the viewport, to the spread of burning ships. "Boarding parties," he said. "Take prisoners. I want survivors. Stories travel faster than corpses." "Prisoners, sir?" another officer asked. Rethan's scarred throat moved as he spoke. "The Republic must learn we are not raiders," he said. "We are not pirates. We are conquerors. Conquerors take trophies. Conquerors take oaths. Conquerors take sons and daughters and turn them into proof." Outside, Imperial shuttles launched, small darts vanishing into the chaos. They latched onto freighters like parasites, cutting through hulls with plasma torches. The holodisplay flickered with boarding feeds, men in dark armor surging through smoke-filled corridors, blaster fire flashing, civilians screaming. A captain's voice crackled over comms. "Moff, we have resistance on freighter Juno's Mercy. Crew armed, attempting to scuttle." Rethan's eyes narrowed. "Send in Sith support," he said. A pause. "Which lord, sir?" Rethan's gaze drifted briefly to the side of the bridge, where a figure in black robes stood motionless, hands folded. Arenth had not spoken since boarding, but his presence was a pressure in the air, like the promise of lightning. "Arenth," Rethan said without turning. "Be useful." Arenth's mouth curved faintly. "Gladly," he murmured. He walked from the bridge without haste. The doors hissed shut behind him. Rethan watched the battle continue, if it could be called a battle. Brentaal's defenses were not designed for this. They were designed for pirates, smugglers, minor conflicts. Not an empire that had spent centuries turning hatred into industry. A red icon blinked on the holomap. A Republic corvette had arrived, small and brave, broadcasting a demand for identification. Its captain's voice came through the speakers, strained but steady. "Unknown vessels," the voice said. "You are in violation of Republic trade law. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." Several officers on the bridge exchanged looks, some amused, some contemptuous. Rethan leaned forward slightly. "Reply," he ordered. A comms officer hesitated. "What should we?" Rethan's smile returned. "Tell them," he said, voice quiet, "that the Empire sends its regards." The message went out. The Republic corvette fired first, green bolts streaking toward the battle cruiser's shields. The shields flared, held. The corvette's captain must have felt hope for a fraction of a second. Then Rethan lifted a hand. "Remove it," he said. The battle cruiser's main cannons spoke. Blue-white fire lanced across the void and punched through the corvette's hull. The ship split, its pieces spinning, then burning, then becoming nothing. Rethan watched until the last ember faded. "Log it," he said. "The Republic has been informed." Outside, Brentaal's orbital lanes filled with wreckage and drifting bodies, and the system's comm relays finally managed to send a broken, crawling distress call toward the core. The scream had begun. The hollow projection stuttered, then stabilized, and suddenly Brentaal's sky was bleeding into the room. Flames curled along shattered hulls. Cargo canisters spun away like tossed bones. Tiny figures drifted in suits, slow and helpless. The feed's audio was mostly static, but now and then a human voice cut through. Ragged, pleading, dying. Lysa stood with her hands clasped before her, nails digging into her palms. Kavar was beside her, jaw clenched so tightly a muscle twitched near his ear. Talon and Yela had arrived moments before, summoned with an urgency that had stripped the usual formality from the Chancellor's staff. Aides crowded the edges of the room, silent except for the occasional whisper. They looked like nobles at an execution, forced to witness but afraid to meet the condemned's eyes. Kavar spoke first. "Enhance the hull markings," he ordered. The technician at the console obeyed. The image zoomed toward one of the black ships, sleek, angular, marked with red designs that were not mere paint but sigils, stylized and sharp. The shape was wrong for the Republic. Wrong for any known pirate fleet. Kavar's voice went hoarse. "That's Imperial design," he said. Lysa's gaze remained locked on the hologram, as if she could will it to change. "Imperial," she repeated, the word now like a knife. "So the ghosts truly come back to haunt my term." One of her advisors, Minister Halen, a thin woman with sharp cheekbones, found her voice. "Chancellor," she said, trying to sound steady, "we cannot announce this to the Senate without confirmation. Panic is already on its way," Kavar snapped. "It's riding the hyperlane behind that distress call." Talon watched the hologram with a different kind of tension. He did not need the markings to know what this was. The force around the image felt like cold oil, slick and suffocating. "The Sith are with them," Talon said quietly. Palin's eyes flicked toward him. "Master Jedi, with respect, we have not." Yela stepped forward, her voice controlled but sharp. "Do you feel that?" she asked, not to Haling but to everyone. "That pressure? That wrongness?" The room went still. Even Kavar paused, eyes narrowing. He had spent his life among numbers and trajectories, but he was not blind to the way some silence carried weight. Lysa looked at Talon. "Is this what you sensed?" she asked, "before the report arrived?" Talon nodded once. "Yes," he said. "And what I sensed is larger than a raid. Brentaal is a message." Kavar's hands clenched. "Then we answer," he said. "We send a task force. We engage. We capture a ship if possible. A new alert chimed. The technician swore under his breath. "Another transmission," he said. "This one's older. It's embedded in the static, like it was delayed." "No." "Play it," Lysa ordered. The audio crackled, then resolved into a single voice. Faint, distorted but clear enough. "This is Brentaal Relay Station," the voice said. "We are under attack by Imperial warships. They carry red banners. They have lightsabers. I repeat, they have..." The voice cut off in a shriek of interference, then silence. Aide Helene made a small sound in her throat, like she had swallowed something sharp. Kavar's eyes closed briefly, as if in pain. Lysa exhaled slowly. "Lightsabers," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Then the Jedi are right. Talon felt something settle into place inside him. Not relief, but grim acceptance. The Republic had taken the first step out of denial. "What do you need from me?" Lysa asked him. "Authority," Talon replied. "To move without being slowed by committees, to coordinate with the Navy, and to send Jedi beyond the temple in numbers." Kavar nodded sharply. "I want Jedi on my ships," he said. "Not as symbols, as weapons." Yella's gaze hardened. "We are not weapons," she said, then softened slightly. "But we will go." Lysa turned toward the window, where Coruscant's rain slid down in glittering lines. The city beyond continued to glow, unaware. It looked impossibly calm, like a child asleep moments before a fire. "Mobilize," she said, turning back. "Quietly at first. We will not scream until we must. Admiral Kavar, assemble a response force. Master Talon, gather your Jedi. Minister Halen, prepare emergency communications, but keep them sealed until I authorize." Halen nodded, pale. Kavar's voice was low, intense. "Chancellor," he said, "if this is truly the Sith Empire, they will not stop at Brentaal." "I know," Lysa said, and in her eyes Talon saw a flicker of iron. "Then we make sure Coruscant remembers how to fight." Outside, the rain continued its careful, regulated fall. Inside, the Republic began to wake up. In the temple's launch bay, the air smelled of polished metal and old stone. Starfighters rested in neat lines, their hulls gleaming under lantern-bright lighting. Technicians moved with reverence, as if touching something holy. Jedi too moved quietly, gathering supplies, checking comlinks, fastening belts. The rituals of departure always carried a weight the rituals of arrival did not. No one saluted when a Jedi left. It was considered unseemly, as if acknowledging the possibility of not returning. Talon walked among them, feeling the shift in the temple's atmosphere. The calm had not broken exactly, but it had tightened, like a breath held. Yella walked at his side, her hands clasped behind her back. She kept her face composed, but Talon could feel her thoughts flickering. Fear, excitement, anger, duty, all braided together. "Do you remember," Talon asked quietly, "the last time the temple mobilized like this?" Yella shook her head. "I was a child," she said. "I remember the stories, but stories are neat." Talon's mouth curved faintly, humorless. "War is rarely neat," he said. They reached a small group of Jedi near one of the fighters, 3 knights and a single master, all of them younger than Talon. Their faces showed determination, but also the uncertainty of people trained for peace, being asked to step into something older and uglier. The master bowed to Talon. "Master Var," he said. "We are ready." Talon studied them, then nodded. "You will travel with Admiral Dorn's task force," he said. "Your priority is rescue, survivors, intelligence. Do not seek glory." One of the knights, a woman with a scar along her jaw, lifted her chin. "And if we encounter Sith?" Talon held her gaze. "Then you will remember your training," he said. "And you will remember that the Sith will try to make you feel righteous." The knight frowned. "Righteousness is not a flaw," she said. "It becomes one," Talon replied, "when it blinds you." He moved on, leaving them with that uncomfortable thought. Yella's voice came softly. "You think the Sith will provoke us?" "I think they will test us," Talon said. "The Jedi are their oldest enemy. They will want to know if we are still sharp." Yella's hand brushed her lightsaber hilt unconsciously. "And are we?" she asked. Talon's gaze went distant, past the fighters, past the bay doors toward Coruscant's endless sky. "We are human," he said. "We will be sharp in some ways and dull in others." A technician approached, carrying a small crate. "Master," he said, bowing quickly, "your supplies." Talon accepted the crate and handed it to Yella. Inside were medpacks, ration bars, spare comlink parts, and a small bundle of cloth that contained nothing visible, but Talon knew what it was. A set of ceremonial strips used to bind the hands of the dead so they could not claw their way back in nightmares. An old superstition from an old war, kept quietly in Jedi storage. Yella noticed it too, and her eyes flicked up. "Do you expect?" "I expect nothing," Talon said softly. "But I prepare for what I fear." A chime echoed through the bay. A voice came over the intercom, calm but edged with urgency. "All Jedi assigned to Task Force Dorn. Departure in 10 minutes. Repeat. Departure in 10 minutes. Around them, Jedi moved a little faster. Robes swayed. Lightsaber hilts clicked into place. The quiet prayers under breath grew more frequent. Yella looked at Talon, and in her eyes he saw something that made his chest tighten. Trust. She believed he would lead her through whatever was coming. He wished fiercely that he could promise her safety. He could not. The Force did not grant such promises. It only offered choices and consequences. "Come," he said, and stepped toward the fighter that would carry them into the dark. As the bay doors began to open, Corasant's clean rain drifted in, cold on the skin. It felt, suddenly, less like a civic function. It felt like a warning. Saren's transport docked at a civilian platform that smelled of fried oils and wet concrete. The Undercity's air was thick, humid, crowded with exhaust, dense with the heat of too many bodies packed into too little space. Above, somewhere far beyond layers of steel and city, the upper tiers glittered. Down here, light came from neon and cracked holos, from vendor stalls and cheap bars that advertised warmth and forgetfulness. Saren stepped into the crowd and became part of it. No one looked twice. That was the art. The Undercity was full of people who did not belong anywhere else. Refugees from failed colonies, criminals, laborers, addicts, dreamers. Saren's face could have belonged to any of them. Saren's posture was tired but not weak. Saren's clothing was worn but not poor. Perfectly forgettable. A contact had been arranged. A man called Brix, not his real name. A smuggler who moved parts from military depots to black market buyers with the same indifferent efficiency he moved spice. Saren did not trust smugglers. Smugglers trusted only credits, and credits did not fear death enough. The meeting place was a bar tucked beneath a sagging walkway, its sign flickering, the gutter light. Inside, the air was warm and sour. Music thumped in the background, too loud, too steady, designed to drown thought. Saren slid into a booth near the back. From here, Saren could see the door, the bar, the corners where men hid. It was habit. It was survival. Brix arrived 10 minutes later, as expected. He was broad, bearded, with a jacket that had once been expensive and was now stained with someone else's blood. He slid into the booth and grinned, showing teeth. "You're late," Brix said. Saren's expression did not change. "You're alive," Saren replied. "That counts as punctual in your profession." Brix chuckled, then leaned forward, lowering his voice. "So," he said, "you're the client who pays in untraceable credits and doesn't ask for receipts." Saren's eyes met his. "I ask for results," Saren said. Brix's grin faded slightly. "What do you need?" "A route," Saren said. "To a shield maintenance facility. One that services the upper-tier defense network." Brix's eyebrows rose. "That's high," he said. "That's not smuggler territory. That's suicide territory." "No." Saren's tone remained calm. "You said you could move anything," Saren said. "I can move anything that doesn't have a battalion guarding it," Brix snapped, then caught himself, glancing around to see if anyone had heard. He lowered his voice again. "Listen, friend, whoever you are, those facilities are under Republic security. Even the gangs don't touch them. Too much heat." Saren leaned back slightly. "Heat is relative," Saren said. "I have a way to reduce it." Brix studied Saren more carefully now. "You're not a gang," he said slowly. "You're not Republic either." "You're what?" Nah, Jian. Saren smiled faintly, just enough to be unsettling. A person, Saren said. With a deadline. Brick's throat bobbed. Deadlines get people killed. Yes, Saren agreed. That is why I pay well. Brix looked away, chewing on the inside of his cheek. Then, he sighed. There's an access tunnel, he said reluctantly. Old, half forgotten. It runs from a service district near the mid-level transit hub. Maintenance used it back when the city was being expanded. The tunnel leads close to a generator substation. Close enough that someone clever could do something. Saren nodded. Show me, Saren said. Brix held up a hand. Not so fast, he said. I show you. I'm involved. If Republic security finds out. They won't, Saren said. And if they do, Brix pressed. Saren's eyes held his, steady as a knife. Then you will have bigger problems, Saren said. Feign Republic security. Brix stared, and Saren could see the moment he decided whether credits were worth fear. In the end, greed won, as it usually did. Fine, Brix muttered. But if I die, I'm haunting you. Saren stood. If you die, Saren said, you will be too busy being dead to haunt anyone. They moved toward the door. Outside, the Undercity's rain fell in dirty sheets, turning the streets into slick, reflective rivers. Neon signs bled color across puddles like spilled wine. People huddled under awnings, faces turned away from the cold. Saren pulled the hood up and followed Brix into the crowd, already mapping every route, every exit, every potential betrayal. Somewhere above them, Corasont's heart beat in ignorance. Saren walked beneath it like a parasite, patient and precise. Aranth moved through the battlecruiser's corridors as if he owned them, and in a way, he did. The ship belonged to the Empire. The Empire belonged to the Sith. And the Sith belonged, ultimately, to the Emperor. The corridors were narrow, deliberately oppressive, designed to make even officers feel the ship's authority pressing in. Red lights pulsed along the ceiling like slow heartbeats. Steam hissed from vents. The air tasted of metal and recycled breath. A group of prisoners knelt in a holding bay as Aranth passed. Civilians taken from a freighter, hands bound, eyes wide. They looked like cattle, and the troopers around them looked like butchers. One of the prisoners, a man with oil-stained hands, lifted his head and met Aranth's gaze. There was hatred there, and disbelief. "Who are you?" the man rasped. Aranth paused. He crouched, lowering himself to the prisoner's level, robe pooling on the deck like spilled ink. "We are," Aranth said softly, "what your Republic pretended did not exist." The man spat at him. The spit struck Aranth's cheek and slid down. A trooper stepped forward, raising a rifle. Aranth lifted a hand, stopping him. Slowly, he wiped the spit away with his thumb, then held the thumb up as if considering the taste of it. "You are brave," Aranth told the prisoner almost kindly. "Bravery is a rare spice in this era. The Republic has grown fat on comfort." The prisoner's eyes narrowed. "You'll die," he said. "The Jedi will." Aranth's smile was thin. "Yes," he said. "They will come." He rose, and as he walked away, the prisoner shouted after him, voice cracking. "What do you want? Credits? Territory? Revenge?" Aranth did not turn. He kept walking, boots silent on the deck. "What do we want?" He could have answered in a dozen ways. Power. Dominion. Glory. The ancient dream of Sith supremacy. All of it was true, in its way. But beneath those truths was another, deeper one. One Aranth had only begun to sense since leaving the Emperor's throne room. They want fear, he thought. They want the galaxy to be a wound. A comm chime sounded in his ear. Rethan's voice came through, low and sharp. "Aranth," Rethan said. "We have confirmation. The distress call escaped. Core Fleet will respond." Aranth's lips curved. "Good," he said. "Let them come." Rethan's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. "We will withdraw before they arrive in force," he said. "Our scouts report they are already scrambling, faster than expected." Aranth felt a flicker of irritation. "The Republic is complacent, not asleep," he said. "Do not confuse comfort with stupidity." Rethan snorted softly. "I don't," he said. "But I do intend to keep our advantage. We take Brentaal's blood, then vanish. Let them chase shadows while we move closer to the throat." Aranth paused near a viewport. Beyond it, Brentaal's orbital debris field drifted like a graveyard. Pieces of freighters, twisted and blackened, spun slowly, catching starlight. Bodies floated among them, tiny and distant. A strange sensation tightened in Aranth's chest. Not remorse. Not pity. Expectation. "This is only the beginning," Aranth murmured, not to Rethan but to himself. Rethan's voice came again. "The Emperor wants a report," he said. Aranth's gaze remained on the drifting bodies. "Tell him," Aranth said, "that the Republic has heard us." "And their response?" Rethan asked. Aranth's eyes narrowed, sensing, through the Force, the faint ripple of panic spreading outward from Brentaal like ink in water. "They will react," Aranth said. "They always do. The question is whether they will react wisely." Rethan's voice was dry. "Wisdom has never been the Republic's strength." Aranth ended the comm and stood alone for a moment, watching the void. In the darkness, he felt the Emperor's attention like a distant star. Cold, constant, indifferent to the small tragedies that fueled it. He turned away from the viewport and walked back toward the bridge. Behind him, the prisoners knelt in chains. Ahead, the war waited. The Republic cruiser shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and the stars snapped into place like a snapped chain. For a breath, the bridge was silent. Then the sensors screamed. Debris filled the forward holodisplay. Metal shards, twisted hull plating, drifting cargo. Heat signatures still flared in places, faint and dying. The wreckage field spread wide, a silent testament to violence done quickly. Talon stood at the captain's shoulder, hands folded in his sleeves, feeling the force around the wreckage like a bruise. It was thick with fear and pain, and beneath it there was something else. An old, sharp malice that did not belong to pirates. Yella stood beside him, her posture rigid. Her eyes were fixed on the holodisplay, and Talon could feel her trying to keep her emotions contained, as Jedi were taught. But anger leaked through anyway, hot as a brand. The captain, Commander Hest, a woman with tired eyes, spoke softly. "Search for survivors," she ordered. "All craft, launch now. Medical teams to the hangar." The bridge erupted into controlled movement. Officers called out coordinates. Technicians adjusted sensor arrays. The ship's engines hummed, the sound like a held breath. Kavar's voice came through over a secure channel, crackling slightly. "Commander Hest," he said. "Report." Hest's jaw tightened. "It's worse than the initial transmission," she said. "Wreckage across a wide orbital band. We're finding escape pods. Some are open." Kavar's silence lasted a fraction too long. Then his voice returned, flat. "Any sign of the attackers?" Hest shook her head, though Kavar could not see it. "Nothing," she said. "No residual hypertrace. They vanished." "Now." Talon closed his eyes briefly, reaching out with the force. He felt echoes, panic fleeing, anger exploding, life extinguished. He felt the attackers' presence like fingerprints on a throat. They had not simply killed. They had enjoyed the killing. "They wanted us to see," Talon said quietly. Yella looked at him sharply. "Wanted," she echoed. Talon opened his eyes. "This is a message," he said again, more certain now. They could have destroyed the comm relay. They could have left no survivors. Instead, they left this. They want the Republic to know what has come for it. "Me. Done." Hest's mouth tightened. Then they're confident, she muttered. They're arrogant, Iella snapped, and her voice carried heat she did not usually allow. They think we'll break. Talon's gaze stayed on the wreckage, on the tiny drifting pods. Arrogance and confidence often look the same from a distance, he said. Until the moment they are tested. A small icon blinked on the holodisplay. Survivor located. A technician called. Escape pod. Life signs weak. Bring it in, Hest ordered. Minutes later, the pod was hauled into the cruiser's hangar. Talon and Iella went with the medics, moving quickly through the corridors. The air in the hangar was colder than usual, and it smelled of fuel and antiseptic. The pod's hatch was forced open. Inside lay a man in a torn flight suit, skin pale, lips cracked. His eyes fluttered as the medics lifted him onto a stretcher. Talon knelt beside him, placing 2 fingers lightly on the man's temple, not probing, not invading, simply offering calm through the force, a gentle anchor. The man's eyes opened wider, focusing on Talon's face with sudden terror. His hand clawed weakly at Talon's robe. They're back, he rasped. Talon's throat tightened. Who is back? He asked softly, though he already knew. The man's eyes filled with tears that looked almost black under the hangar lights. The Sith, he whispered. They had red blades. They laughed. They? His voice broke into a cough, and blood flecked his lips. The medics moved in, urging Talon aside. Iella's face had gone very still. Did you hear that? She whispered. Talon nodded, standing slowly. Yes, he said. The word Sith hung in the hangar like smoke. Above them, the cruiser's hull creaked softly as it adjusted position among the debris. Outside, bodies drifted in the cold, and the stars looked indifferent. Talon looked down at his hands, still feeling the survivor's terror clinging to his fingers like oil. Somewhere out there, beyond the wreckage, the enemy was moving closer to the core, and the Jedi were no longer arguing with ghosts. On Dromund Kaas, the storm did not end. It only changed its rhythm, as if the planet itself breathed in thunder. Vitiate sat alone now, far from the court and the war rooms. The chamber he chose was not meant for audiences. It was an inner sanctum, stone walls carved with ancient Sith runes that seemed to absorb sound, floor slick with black water that reflected nothing true. The air smelled of ash. A circle of sigils had been etched into the floor around him, not with paint but with something that had once been alive. In their faint red glow, the room looked like the inside of a wound. Vitiate's eyes were half-lidded. His hands rested on his knees. He appeared meditative, almost serene. In the Force, he was anything but. He reached outward not like a man extending a hand, but like a mind unfurling across distance. The galaxy's currents flowed around him, millions of lives, countless thoughts, hopes and fears like a sea of sparks. Most of it was noise, uninteresting. But now there was a fresh taste in that noise. Panic from Brentaal. Grief. Rage. Confusion. The first ripples of Republic alarm. The Jedi stirring, their attention turning outward like wary predators. Vitiate's mouth curved slightly. So easy, he thought. Still, he drew in the emotion like breath. It did not sustain his body. His body was a tool, a shell. It sustained something deeper, something vast. Each death, each scream, each whispered prayer of disbelief added weight to his presence. He had done this before. Nathema had been a single world, a feast in miniature. The galaxy, by contrast, was a banquet that took patience. He had been patient, but patience was not virtue. It was strategy, and strategies could be revised. In the black water around him, shadows stirred, rising like smoke. Faces formed briefly, men and women screaming, mouths open, eyes wide, then dissolved. The chamber was full of ghosts that were not ghosts, only echoes caught and trapped by the ritual's gravity. Vitiate listened to them without emotion. He did not need their words. Their fear was language enough. Somewhere far away he sensed the Jedi Master, Talon, kneeling beside a dying survivor, offering comfort. The gesture was almost touching in its futility. The Jedi were candles, Vitiate thought. Bright, noble, fragile. They had spent centuries convincing themselves the wind had died. He tasted the Jedi's shock, and it pleased him. Soon, Vitiate whispered, and the word fell into the black water without ripple. A memory flickered, his own, ancient. A boy on a forgotten world, eyes hungry, learning how easily people knelt when pain taught them humility. A man on a dead planet, standing amid drained bodies, realizing that death could be harvested. An emperor in the dark, building an empire out of remnants and rage. Now, an emperor again, deciding the hour of revelation. He reached farther. Toward Corasont's bright core, toward its endless population, toward the temple's concentrated light. The distance was vast, but distance was a physical concept, and Vitiate had never respected physical concepts. For a heartbeat, he brushed the edge of Corasont's collective mind, a city's worth of dreams and routines. Complacency layered like armor. He could feel, too, the Undercity's hunger, the anger buried beneath the Republic's polished surface. It was a vein ripe for cutting. Vitiate's eyes opened fully, and in them there was no storm, no warmth, no humanity, only intention. "The core will bleed," he murmured. Earlier than they imagined. Lightning flashed through the chamber's narrow windows, turning the rune's glow briefly violet. The shadows in the water writhed. Far across the galaxy, a senator on Corasont paused mid-sentence, suddenly cold, as if someone had walked over his grave. The force trembled, and the tremor carried laughter no one could quite hear. The service tunnel stank of rust and old water. Brix led the way, his flashlight beam jittering with his breath. The walls were metal, patched in places with newer cladding, but most of it was ancient, evidence of Corasont's endless layering, the city built atop itself like sediment. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping steadily. Now and then, a fat insect skittered into the light and vanished again. Saren followed without making noise. Brix kept glancing back, as if expecting Saren to transform into something monstrous. "We're close," he whispered, voice echoing. Saren said nothing. Silence was useful. It made other people fill it with their fears. They reached a junction where the tunnel split. Brix stopped, wiping sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand. "Through there," he said, pointing left. "It leads up to the mid-level transit hub. The substation is above that." Saren's eyes moved over the junction. Scratches on the wall, fresh footprints in grime. Someone else had used this route recently. Saren's hand drifted toward the concealed blaster under the cloak. "We are not alone," Saren said softly. Brix froze. "What?" he hissed. A sound came from the left tunnel. Soft, deliberate. Footsteps. Multiple. Brix's eyes widened. "No," he whispered. No. This wasn't supposed." Saren stepped forward, pushing Brix gently behind. The cloak shifted, and the blaster appeared in Saren's hand like a conjured thing. 3 figures emerged from the left tunnel, gang lookouts, by their ragged jackets and the crude tattoos on their throats. They held vibrock knives and a cheap blaster. Their eyes were hard, hungry. The leader grinned. "Well," he said, "look what the tunnel dragged in." Brix raised his hands quickly. "Listen," he stammered. "We're just—" "Shut up," the leader snapped, then looked at Saren. "You," he said. "You look like money." Saren's expression remained calm. "I am," Saren said. The leader laughed, stepping closer. "Then give it," he demanded. Saren fired once. The blaster bolt struck the leader in the chest. The man went down without a sound, surprise frozen on his face. The other 2 froze for a heartbeat, then moved, one lunging with a knife, the other raising the cheap blaster. Saren shifted. Efficient. The knife wielder's wrist was caught, twisted, broken. The knife clattered to the floor. Saren drove an elbow into the man's throat and sent him collapsing, choking. The third fired wildly. The bolt scorched the wall near Brix's head, and Brix screamed. Saren fired twice. The third man fell. Silence returned, heavy and sudden. Brix stared at the bodies, trembling. "Stars," he whispered. "Stars, who are you?" Saren holstered the blaster. "A person with a deadline," Saren repeated, voice as steady as before. Brix's breath came in ragged gasps. "We have to go," he hissed. "If the gang hears, they will," Saren said. Brix's eyes darted to the tunnel behind them. "Then we're dead." Saren stepped over the fallen leader and retrieved the man's comlink, checking it quickly. "Not yet," Saren said. Footsteps echoed in the distance now. More of them, faster. Saren looked at Brix. "You can run back," Saren said. "Or you can keep moving up. If you run, you will be chased. If you go up, you might survive." Brix's face twisted. Greed warred with fear. Fear won this time. "I'm done," he spat. "I'm done with this." He turned to flee. Saren let him go. A liability that chose to remove itself was a gift. Saren turned toward the left tunnel, toward the transit hub above, toward the substation that fed a fraction of Corasont's defense network. The footsteps behind grew louder, voices rising. Saren moved forward into the darkness, calm as a blade sliding from a sheath. The Undercity would bleed tonight, quietly, and the core would not know it was being opened. Kavar watched ships arrive the way a farmer watched clouds gather, counting, measuring, knowing the storm's size mattered more than his hope. The muster point near Kuat was busy with traffic, the space around it thick with moving lights. Patrol corvettes, frigates, a handful of heavier cruisers, all coming in on emergency recall orders that had been phrased carefully, quietly, to avoid tipping the Senate into public panic. Kavar stood on the command deck of his flagship, hands clasped behind his back, posture rigid. The deck smelled of metal and nervous sweat. Officers spoke in clipped tones, their professionalism strained by the unfamiliar taste of real threat. "Report," Kavar said. An officer stepped forward. "We have 6 cruisers in position," she said. 4 frigates, 12 corvettes, more inbound. Kavar's jaw tightened. It was not enough. It was never enough. "What about the reserve squadrons?" he demanded. The officer hesitated. "Some are grounded," she said. "Parts shortages, maintenance delays, Senate committees." Kavar's eyes flashed. "The Senate committees can drown in their own paperwork," he snapped. "We are at war." The word felt strange, heavy, as if speaking it made it more real. A comm alert chimed. The officer at communications looked up, pale. "Admiral," he said. "Incoming from Corasont, Chancellor Terran." Kavar moved to the holoprojector. Liza's image appeared, blue and steady. Behind her, Kavar could see the edge of a room full of people. Advisors, guards, perhaps Jedi. The atmosphere around her was tense even through the distortion. "Admiral," Liza said. "We have confirmation from Brentaal survivors. Sith involvement." Me. Kavar felt the old buried rage rise. Rage at complacency, at politics, at the idea that the Republic had let itself become soft enough to be surprised by monsters. "Understood," he said. "My fleet is mustering." Liza's gaze held his. "We have another problem," she said. Kavar's stomach tightened. "Speak." Liza's voice lowered. "Our defense analysts detected anomalies in Corasont's shield maintenance network," she said. "Minor discrepancies. Substations reporting unusual access requests. No confirmed breach yet, but—" "Sabotage," Kavar said, bitter. "They're already inside." Liza's expression did not deny it. "We are investigating," she said. But the Sith are coordinating an internal disruption with external attack. They may attempt something. Kivar's mind raced. Kuat. Anaxes. Corasont. The Republic's spine. They would not dare. One of Kivar's officers muttered behind him, half to herself. Kivar turned his head slightly. They already dared, he said. He looked back at Lysa. If Coruscant's shields are compromised, you must move your leadership, he said. Get the Senate to a secure location. Evacuate key personnel. None. Lysa's eyes narrowed. If I order evacuation, she said, the Senate will riot. Then let them riot in a bunker. Kivar snapped, then forced his tone down. Chancellor, if Coruscant falls, there is no republic. Only fragments. Lysa's gaze softened slightly, and Kivar saw the human beneath the office. I know, she said. Do what you can. I will do what I must. The holocall ended. Kivar stared at the empty air for a heartbeat, then turned back to his officers. Accelerate the muster, he ordered. I want every ship that can move to move. I want fighter wings fueled and armed. And I want a strike group ready to jump to Coruscant on my command. Yes, Admiral, the officers replied. Voices sharp, Badora. Kivar walked to the viewport. Kuat's shipyards glimmered in the distance, massive structures like metallic cities. For centuries, they had built the Republic's strength. Now they looked like targets painted in starlight. Kivar's reflection stared back at him in the glass, older than he felt, eyes hard. He thought of Coruscant's clean reign, of senators arguing, of Jedi meditating. He thought of black ships carving through Brentaal's orbit like knives through flesh. If you come, he murmured toward the void, you'll find we're not as soft as you think. He did not know if it was true, but he would die making it true. The warning came too late. Kuat's shipyard traffic controllers saw the hyperlane shimmer first, an anomaly, a ripple that did not match any scheduled arrival. They began to ask questions, to request identification codes, to prepare to dispatch patrol craft. Then the Sith ships arrived, and questions died. They dropped out of hyperspace in disciplined formation, black hulls catching starlight like edges of obsidian. Their silhouettes were wrong, too angular, too predatory, too purposeful. Red markings glowed faintly along their sides, like veins. Shipyard workers watched from observation decks, faces pressed to glass, frozen between disbelief and terror. Some had lived long enough to hear stories of the Sith, whispered by old veterans and dismissed by younger men as myth. Now myth filled their sky. On Rethan's bridge, the holomap lit with Kuat's defenses, orbital platforms, patrol squadrons, shipyard arrays. Rethan studied it the way a butcher studied an animal, noting where to cut first. Target their construction docks, he ordered. Do not destroy the shipyards entirely. Cripple. Burn. Leave them with enough hope to keep working. Then take that hope away. Meira. Me. Shan't. No. An officer hesitated. Moff, he said. There are civilians. Rethan's gaze slid to him. Yes, Rethan said. There are. The officer swallowed and turned back to his console. The Sith fleet opened fire. Turbolaser bolts lanced across space, striking Kuat's outer defense platforms. Shields flared, held for a heartbeat, then collapsed under the weight of concentrated assault. Platforms exploded, debris scattering like shrapnel. A Republic patrol squadron launched, fighters streaking out in frantic swarms. They looked like insects against the Sith ships. Their pilots' voices crackled over comms, orders, prayers, curses. Then Sith interceptors launched, sleek and dark. They moved with terrifying coordination, cutting through the Republic fighters. The space around Kuat filled with fire. Rethan watched without expression. Send boarding parties to the shipyard command station, he said. I want their oversight systems. I want their schedules. I want their engineers alive." "Alive?" the officer repeated. Rethan's scar shifted as he spoke. "Alive," he confirmed. "Engineers are more useful than ashes." A comm line opened. Aranth's voice came through, low and pleased. "You chose Kuat," Aranth said. "It is symbolic," Rethan replied. "And practical." Aranth chuckled softly. "The Republic will feel this," he said. "Their shipwrights will weep." Rethan's eyes remained on the viewport. A massive ship under construction, a half-finished cruiser, was hit amidships. The hull split open, and atmosphere vented in a shimmering cloud. Workers inside were flung into the void like scattered seeds. "Do not become sentimental," Rethan said to Aranth. "We have minutes before their core fleet responds." Aranth's voice carried amusement. "Sentiment is for the Republic," he said. "We have purpose." Rethan ended the comm and turned to his tactical officer. "Signal the rest of the fleet," he said. "We strike hard for 10 minutes, then we withdraw." The tactical officer frowned. "Withdraw, sir? We could press. Take the shipyards entirely." Rethan's smile returned, and it was cold. "We are not here to win Kuat today," he said. "We are here to teach them they can lose anything." Outside, Kuat burned. The shipyard's lights flickered as systems failed. Explosions bloomed along docking arms. Fire spread in bright chains, venting into space like dragon flame without air. The Republic's defenders fought, brave and frantic, but they were unprepared for an enemy that did not hesitate. In the chaos, a single, smaller Sith ship slipped away from the main formation. Fast, quiet, its trajectory aimed not at Kuat, but toward the hyperlane that led deeper into the core. Rethan watched it go, eyes narrowing. "Go," he murmured, as if to the ship itself. "Carry the knife." The Sith fleet withdrew after exactly 10 minutes, vanishing back into hyperspace before the heavier Republic cruisers could arrive in force. Kuat was left smoking, bleeding, screaming into the void. And in the core, the Republic finally understood. The enemy was not knocking politely at the frontier. The enemy was already at the gates. Lysa stood at the window and watched Corasont glitter as if nothing had changed. The city was beautiful at night. It always was. Lights flowed along traffic lanes like rivers of gold. Towers rose in layered clusters, their upper tiers crowned with gardens and private balconies. The rain turned everything reflective, smoothing hard edges into something almost romantic. It would have been easy to pretend this was simply another night, but the comm reports stacked on her desk like accusations. Brentaal. Kuat. The word Sith whispered in rooms that had not dared speak it for generations. Her advisors moved like nervous birds, flitting in and out with updates, each one worse than the last. When the door chimed and Talon was admitted, Lysa did not turn immediately. She listened to the sound of Jedi boots on polished floor, the faint wetness of a cloak shaken off. It was a strangely human sound amid so much looming catastrophe. "I told you 5 minutes was already too late," Talon said softly behind her. Lysa's mouth tightened. "You did," she replied. She turned then, facing him. Talon looked tired in a way he had not in the Senate. His eyes held the weight of what he had seen. Yella stood a step behind him, face pale but steady, her gaze sharp. "What happened?" Lysa asked, though she already knew, or knew enough. "Kuat was struck," Talon said. "Hit and run. They crippled shipyard operations. They withdrew before Kavar could engage." Lysa's hands clenched. "They're probing," she said, voice low. "Testing how fast we respond." "Yes," Talon agreed. "And they are moving with purpose." Lysa gestured toward the desk, toward the reports. "I'm trying to keep the Senate calm," she said, bitterness creeping in. "They're arguing about whether we can even call this an invasion without a formal declaration. Some of them think it's a Mandalorian ploy. Others think it's an internal conspiracy to justify defense spending." Talon's gaze softened slightly. "Fear makes people stupid," he said. "Politics makes them worse," Lysa muttered. A siren wailed faintly in the distance, carried through the tower's sound insulation. Lysa's eyes flicked toward it, then back. "You said Corasont's defense network showed anomalies," she said. "Do you know more?" Yella stepped forward, voice controlled. "We found evidence of undercity activity near one of the substations," she said. "Not confirmed sabotage, but likely," Lysa finished. Talon nodded. "The Sith are not merely attacking from outside," he said. "They are inside. They always were. They have had centuries to plant seeds." Lysa's breath came slow. "If our shields fail," she began. Talon's gaze held hers. "Then the Corps learns what the frontier has always known," he said. "That safety is a story we tell ourselves." Lysa turned away again, looking out at Corasont. "I have never wanted this job," she said quietly. "Not truly. I wanted to keep the Republic from tearing itself apart. I wanted to make peace profitable enough that no one would choose war." Talon's voice was gentle. "War chooses sometimes," he said. Lysa laughed once, short and humorless. "That's very Jedi," she said. Then she straightened, the Chancellor returning. "All right," she said. "I will move key Senate leadership to secure facilities under the Rotunda. I will initiate emergency continuity protocols, and I will authorize Kevar to deploy the Corps Defense Fleet publicly." Her advisors hovering nearby stiffened. One of them opened his mouth to protest. Lysa cut him off with a glance. "We are beyond optics," she said. "We are beyond politics. If the Senate wants to argue, they can argue underground." Talon inclined his head. "Good," he said. Lysa turned to Yella. "And you," she said. "The Jedi will stand with us." Yella's eyes met hers. "We will," she said simply. Lysa nodded, then looked back out at Corasont. The city still glittered, still beautiful, still blind. In the Force, Talon could feel the pressure growing, like a storm building beyond the horizon. He sensed a mind behind it, vast, cold, amused. "The Emperor," Talon whispered, barely aware he spoke aloud. Lysa looked at him sharply. "What?" she asked. Talon's eyes were distant. "The Sith are not just returning," he said. "They are being led." Outside, Corasont's rain continued to fall, clean and steady. Inside, Lysa felt something shift in her chest, fear hardening into resolve. She had been elected to manage disputes. Now she would be judged by something older than politics. "Then," she said, voice quiet and fierce, "let their leader come." The substation chamber was colder than the tunnels below, its air conditioned to protect machinery that could not sweat. Saren slipped into it through a maintenance hatch that still smelled faintly of old oil. The room beyond was a lattice of conduits and humming panels, banks of processors stacked like silent altars. Soft blue indicator lights dotted the walls. A holoscreen displayed shield harmonics, graphs and numbers that meant nothing to most citizens and everything to a city's survival. Saren moved with practiced speed. Gloves came off. Tools appeared. A panel was opened with a quiet click. Inside, wires ran like veins. Saren traced them, following a schematic memorized hours ago. The plan was simple in concept. Introduce a flaw so subtle the system would compensate for it without triggering a full alarm, until stress forced that compensation to become collapse. A small device, no larger than a thumb, rested in Saren's palm. It looked like nothing, a sliver of dark metal with faint Imperial etching. It was, in truth, a parasite. It would feed on the system's own self-corrections and quietly rewrite priorities. Saren slid it into place. The holoscreen's graph line wavered, then smoothed. The system adjusted. No alarm sounded. Saren exhaled slowly. Footsteps echoed outside the chamber, muffled but close. Voices, 2 of them. Security. Saren replaced the panel and stepped back into shadow, cloak blending with the room's darker corners. The security officers entered a moment later, flashlights sweeping. "Sensor flagged a fluctuation," one officer muttered. Probably another calibration drift. Tell me about it, the other replied. Ever since the Chancellor started these readiness checks, everything's twitching. They moved toward the console, tapping in commands. The holoscreen shifted, displaying diagnostics. The parasite Saren had implanted hid itself in plain sight, labeled as a redundant subroutine. See? The first officer said. Nothing. False positive. Good, the second said, already turning away. I want to get off this shift. My kid's got a school recital. Saren watched them leave, faces briefly lit by the console's glow. Ordinary men. Ordinary lives. That was what made Sabotage so easy. Everyone had something else they wanted to do. When the door sealed behind them, Saren stepped out again. The device continued to pulse faintly, invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. Saren checked the time. The fleet would be moving. Rethan would be positioning. The Emperor would be listening. Saren felt no pride. Pride was a luxury. Saren felt only the calm satisfaction of a job done precisely. A comm buzzed softly at Saren's wrist. Encrypted, Imperial. Saren glanced at it. A single line of text. Status? Saren typed one word in reply. Opening. Then Saren slipped back into the maintenance hatch and vanished into the tunnels, leaving Corasont's shield network quietly, fatally wounded. Above, the city continued to glow. Below, the knife turned. Kevar felt the shift before the sensors confirmed it. It was not the Force. Kevar had no such sensitivity. It was instinct, honed by decades of watching space and knowing when it changed. Space had a way of feeling empty until it suddenly did not. Admiral, a sensor officer called, voice tight. Hyperlane disturbance. Multiple signatures. Kevar's hands tightened on the railing. Where? He demanded. The holomap flared. A cluster of red icons blinked into existence near the primary approach lanes. Too close, too sudden. They're coming straight in, the officer said. No attempt to mask. Kevar's mouth went dry. They're not afraid, he murmured. Around him, officers moved fast, voices overlapping. Fighters launched from carriers. Defense platforms rotated, weapons cycling. The Republic fleet formed a defensive arc above Corasont, ships aligning like a shield wall. Kevar looked through the viewport. At first, there was only starlight. Then the hyperlane shimmered, and black hulls emerged. Sith ships, their silhouettes like storm clouds made solid. Red markings glowed along their sides, faint but unmistakable. A low sound went through Kevar's bridge. Not words, not quite. A collective intake of breath. Open comms, Kevar ordered. His voice was steady, though his heart hammered. All ships, this is Admiral Dorn. Hold formation. Target their lead vessels. Protect the defense platforms. Do not break. A comms officer swallowed. They're transmitting, he said. Put it through, Kevar said. Static hissed. Then a voice filled the bridge. Calm, deep, faintly amused. This is Moff Sarn, the voice said. The Empire thanks you for assembling. It saves us the trouble of hunting you. Nah, no. Kevar's eyes narrowed. This is Republic space, Kevar said into the comm. You are in violation of every... Rethan's laughter cut him off, soft and contemptuous. You still speak in laws, Rethan said. How charming. Kevar's voice went cold. Turn back, he said, or be destroyed. Destroyed? Rethan echoed, as if tasting the word. Admiral, I came here to destroy something far more precious than ships. The comm cut. Kevar clenched his jaw. Fire, he ordered. The Republic fleet unleashed its first volley, green and blue bolts streaking toward the Sith ships. The void lit with lines of energy. Sith shields flared, held. Some bolts punched through smaller escort craft, turning them into bursts of debris. But the main battlecruisers endured, pushing forward like siege towers. Sith return fire came a heartbeat later, turbolaser bolts that struck Republic ships with brutal force. A frigate to Kavar's left took a direct hit and broke apart, fire venting into space like blood. Kavar's bridge shook as his flagship's shields absorbed impacts. Officers shouted damage reports. Fighter wings swarmed, darting between larger ships, engaging Sith interceptors in frantic dogfights. Above Corasont, the planet's shield aura shimmered, normally a stable, invisible barrier. Now it flickered strangely, uneven, as if its heartbeat had become irregular. Kavar's stomach tightened. "What's wrong with the planetary shields?" he demanded. A technician's fingers flew over controls. His face went pale. "Harmonics are fluctuating," he stammered. "Like, the network is struggling to compensate." Kavar's eyes narrowed. "Sabotage," he growled. A comm chime. Liza's voice came through, strained but composed. "Admiral," she said, "we have confirmation. There was a breach in a substation. We're trying to isolate it." Kavar slammed his fist against the railing. "How long?" he snapped. "I don't know," Liza admitted. "Minutes, maybe. Hours, if we're lucky." Kavar's gaze locked on the viewport, on the Sith ships pressing closer. "We don't have hours," he said. On the battlecruiser's bridge, Rethan watched Corasont's flickering shield with satisfaction. "There," he murmured, almost lovingly. "There it is." Kavar felt the Republic fleet beginning to strain, ships taking damage, formations loosening under pressure. He could not afford panic. Panic was infection. "All ships," he barked into comms. "Hold, hold. If we break, Corasont dies." The words were brutal, and they worked. The fleet tightened again, a desperate shield wall in the stars. Below them, Corasont's city lights continued to glow, unaware of how close darkness had come. Above, the Sith pressed forward, and the planet's shield flickered like a candle in wind. In the temple, the lights dimmed, not from power failure, but from something less tangible. Talon felt it first as a pressure behind the eyes, a weight on the soul. The force around Corasont trembled, not with the normal chaos of battle, though battle raged overhead now, but with something more focused. A will, a mind. The council chamber was full of Jedi, their faces drawn, their robes still. They stood in small clusters, listening to incoming reports, sending out orders. The calm was held like a shield, but Talon could feel cracks forming. Yella stood at his side, hands clenched at her belt. Her knuckles were white. Her eyes were fixed on nothing visible, staring inward as Jedi did when they tried to understand what the Force was telling them. Then the presence touched them. It was not like a Sith Lord's anger, hot and sharp. It was not like a rogue Darksider's hunger, desperate and loud. This was cold. It was vast. It was amused. Talon's breath caught. In his mind's eye, he saw black water and lightning. He saw a pale face like a mask. He saw a throne carved from centuries of violence. "The Emperor," he whispered again, and this time he knew it was not metaphor. It was a name the Force itself seemed to recoil from. Yella's head snapped toward him. "You feel him," she said, voice barely audible. Talon nodded, throat tight. "He's reaching," he said. Across the chamber, one of the older masters swayed, hand going to his chest as if struck. Another Jedi dropped to one knee, eyes squeezed shut, fighting nausea. The presence did not attack like a blade. It leaned. It pressed. It made the air feel thinner, the light dimmer, the walls closer. Outside the chamber's high windows, flashes of battle reflected faintly, bursts of light in the heavens above Corasont. The city beyond continued to glow, and yet the temple felt suddenly like a candle surrounded by wind. A council member, Master Rellan, gray-haired stern, stepped forward, voice strained. "Master Talon," he said. "You led the warning. What is this?" Talon swallowed. "It is the mind behind the fleet," he said. Not merely a commander. Something older, stronger. Rellen's jaw tightened. A Sith Lord, he said, as if naming it made it manageable. Talon shook his head slowly. An emperor, he corrected. And not one who rules by politics. He rules by will. Yella's eyes closed, and Talon felt her reaching into herself, searching for balance. He's looking at the city, she whispered. At all of them. Talon's hands curled into fists. He wanted to push back, to shield Corasont with the Force itself, to defy the pressure. But defiance was not enough against something like this. You did not stop the ocean by shouting at it. The presence shifted, and for a heartbeat Talon felt something like curiosity. An ancient mind noticing a particular spark among millions. Talon's skin prickled. He knew, with sudden certainty, that the Emperor had noticed him. Not as a threat, not as an equal, as a candle worth extinguishing. Talon stepped forward, voice firm despite the pressure in his skull. All Jedi, he said, projecting through the chamber. Center yourselves. Do not feed him with fear. The dark side thrives on reaction. A younger knight's voice cracked. How do we not fear this? She whispered. Talon's gaze softened, then hardened again. By remembering, he said, that he is not a god. He is a being. A powerful one. But a being. Mayo. Even as he said it, he felt how thin the statement was. The Emperor's presence made gods feel plausible. In the distance, a deeper tremor rolled through the Force. Something shifting in Coruscant's shield network, something weakening further. Yella opened her eyes, and they were bright with tears she refused to let fall. Master, she said, voice steady now. What do we do? Talon looked toward the windows, toward the city, toward the battle in the heavens. He thought of Kavar holding a line in space. He thought of Lysa trying to keep a government from eating itself. He thought of Saren's knife turning in a substation below. We go where the wound is, Talon said. We find the hand that made it, and we stop it before Corasont becomes another Brentaal. Rellen nodded sharply. Then go, he said. May the Force. The chamber's lights flickered again, and this time it felt like laughter. Not sound. Feeling. A mockery in the dark. Talon's spine went rigid. The Emperor's presence was still there, pressing, watching. A reminder that this was not merely a battle of ships. It was a battle of wills. Talon turned toward the exit, Yella at his side, and the Jedi began to move. Knights and masters leaving the chamber like a procession of reluctant soldiers. Above them, Coruscant's sky was on fire, and somewhere in the storm of the Force, an emperor smiled at the thought of an early feast.